So if you consider yourself to be a film buff, or if you would like to be, then these are going to be 10 movies you really do need to see, in some cases more than once, to really call yourself a movie buff. These are classic movies. Some of them are deep cuts, but they're all top-notch films that really should be seen for movie fanatics, starting with my number 10 pick, which is a total classic, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Now, this is a cult classic for a reason, and the thing about Killer Clowns is the movie is every bit as good as the title would lead you to believe. There are lots of movies that get made like this with silly titles and silly concepts that are just absolute garbage, but Killer Clowns from Outer Space has a ton of fun with the concept of Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which is exactly what you get with this movie. It's cheesy, it's silly at every turn, but it's also very self-aware, and it has, again, a lot of fun with the concept. All of the clowns' weapons and things are all cartoonish in nature, and it's a fun watch as a result. Lots of movies get made like this, and 99% of them are absolutely terrible and borderline unwatchable, but in that space, Killer Clowns from Outer Space has got to be like the godfather of the B-level horror movie, or at least one of them. There's a handful that are about this good. Killer Clowns is certainly one of them. So it's already almost the end of January, and one of my goals for the new year is actually to learn a new language, which is where today's sponsor comes in, Babbel. Now, I've wanted to learn a second language for a long time. I did study Latin in high school, and while it wasn't completely useless, I can decipher some words in several languages. I'm far from being able to speak in another language, and given my geography and the state of the world today, Spanish seems like the most practical for me. And Babbel is one of the top language learning apps in the world, and what I like so much about it is it's incredibly easy and intuitive to pick up. The lessons are designed by real language experts, and even though I'm just now starting, they say it's proven that you're able to start speaking in another language within 3 weeks. And right now, you can get 60% off your Babbel subscription when you use my link in the video description down below. I also love that Babbel teaches practical conversations about business, travel, relationships, a lot of other stuff. Not just the language, they're teaching you how to speak with people in today's world. And even though I'm just starting to use the app, Babbel's already helping me with some of the important basics like Donde están sus baños or Está bien, no te preocupes. So if you've always wanted to learn a second language, why not do it along with me? Go to the link in the description, get 60% off your Babbel subscription. It's a fantastic deal, but speaking of fantastic stuff, let's talk about all the movies on this list. Now, if I stick with Babbel long enough, apparently in about 6 months or so, I might be able to watch my next pick without subtitles, El Mariachi. Now, this is the first feature film from Robert Rodriguez, who would go on to do movies like Desperado, Sin City, and a handful of kids' movies like Spy Kids, but this was famously filmed for $7,000 and a little change, which is peanuts to make a movie of any kind, but El Mariachi is packed with action. Now, you can tell that it is a low-budget movie. By no means does this look like it's got a big budget, but it looks like it cost a hell of a lot more than $7 grand. In fact, to this day, El Mariachi still holds the Guinness World Record for the lowest budget film to gross over $1 million at the box office. And as part of a trilogy, Desperado would be the sequel, which is really just a second attempt at almost the same story, and that too is a famous movie with Antonio Banderas and Salma Hayek. El Mariachi has no one famous in it, but it still works and is a wild ride. It was filmed in Mexico, it's all in Spanish, you will have to read subtitles, but if you consider yourself a movie buff, this is one of those essential indie movies that you need to see, not just because it's a cool movie, but you can also see some of the craft behind it, and you can see what can be done with very little money if the storytelling is there. Now, I do have some classic movies from some top-tier directors on this list, but my next pick is one of the smaller movies. It's budget-wise not as small as El Mariachi, but it's certainly not as well known as El Mariachi either. I'm talking about a little-known movie titled Cashback. Now, I do believe this qualifies as a romantic comedy. It's certainly a romance movie, but it's very different from anything else I've seen in that genre, so stick with me, because if you don't typically like romantic comedies, there's still a lot to love with Cashback. This is about a young man who goes through a very painful breakup and develops insomnia and starts working late shifts at a local supermarket. Now, that sounds like a pretty dull setup, but what happens is his imagination takes over, resulting in some pretty wild sequences on film. Now, again, this is all just in his head, and it's not quite as creepy as it might sound. It's actually done pretty artfully in the movie, and it's also done in a very interesting way where time stops and there's this dilation, and it's not science fiction. Again, this is his imagination, but the filmmaking brings it to life in a fantastic way, and it's a pretty solid story as well. It keeps things moving, and it's just really kind of expertly put together for a little indie romantic movie. As you can tell by the clips, there is a fair amount of nudity in this movie, so not really a good pick for mixed company, but a fantastic little indie flick. If it's been a while since you've seen a good indie movie, this is certainly one of the better hidden gems available on Prime Video right now. I said there were some big name directors. One of the biggest in movie history comes up next, Martin Scorsese's The Color of Money.
You smell what I smell? Smoke?
Money.
Now, The Color of Money, I believe, is the only sequel Martin Scorsese has ever directed. This is the sequel to the 1961 movie, The Hustler, starring Paul Newman. He's playing the same character 25 years later, mentoring this young hotshot pool player, played by Tom Cruise, who is actually doing quite a bit of the shots you see in the movie. Not all of them, but he did learn how to play pool for this movie, which he often does for his different roles, and this was no exception. While I don't think this is one of Martin Scorsese's best movies, it is a fantastic follow-up to The Hustler, which is also just an amazing movie. If you've never seen The Hustler from 1961, I highly recommend checking it out, but in my opinion, you do not have to see that first to thoroughly enjoy The Color of Money. Now, my number 6 pick is going to change things up quite a bit. This is a zombie movie from South Korea that has topped list on this channel several times over the years, Train to Busan. Now, this movie has really picked up some steam over the years. It has developed an audience. I hope I played a small role in that because I cannot recommend this movie enough. This is a zombie movie that I have watched in mixed company several times over the years, and everyone is always surprised at how much they love this movie by the time it ends. The basic setup is a father and daughter get trapped on a train to Busan during a zombie outbreak, and it's a zombie outbreak very similar to the one in World War Z, where giant hordes of zombies seem to manifest almost instantaneously. It happens on the train, it happens off the train. It's wild stuff and a fantastic story to boot. There's incredible character development for several characters and a lot of heart for a zombie movie. I'm all for movies with a big spectacle, but a lot of times they forget to put a heart in the movie, and Train to Busan definitely did not, which is why I love this one so much. But I'm going to change things up even further with one of the weirdest movies to have been released in 2018, Sorry to Bother You.
God made this land for all of us. Greedy people like you want to hog it to yourself and your family. And
me and my family?
Yeah.
Cassius, I'm your f***ing uncle.
Now, not only is this a super artsy movie, but it is also super cool. This movie has an incredible style to it, and not just the way that it was shot. I'm not just talking about the look of the movie. The way it's edited, the voice acting, everything has this, I don't even want to just say style. It has such a unique style, one that I've never seen on film before. I mean, it reminded me a little bit of Spike Lee's early work, like Do the Right Thing, but it is very unique in its own right. Lakeith Stanfield is the star here. He plays a telemarketer who basically learns a little trick that really lets him move up in the ranks in this company. It's all metaphorical, but it's beautifully done. Now, I will warn you, this one goes into a incredibly bizarre direction, yet metaphorically, I think it all worked, and I still give this one big points for just going in a bonkers direction. This movie really owns the bonkers nature of where it goes. It's wackadoo stuff, but it works in Sorry to Bother You. This is one of the newer movies on this list, but as it stands, it's also one of the cooler art films to have come out in the last 5 years or so. And then we'll go back to basics with my number 4 pick, Ronin.
Get out of here.
Walk away. Walk away.
Now, I will say, we've talked about some other movies already that are maybe better in their quality than Ronin, or at least the storytelling. I do think the story unravels a little bit with Ronin, not terribly so, but a little bit, where some of the others are more solid. The reason that Ronin gets ranked where it does, though, is because of the car chases. They're not just fun to watch, either. They are expertly executed. If you don't know, car chases are incredibly complicated to orchestrate. The viewer always needs to know who is where, how close they are to each other, things like that, and it's difficult to pull off across multiple shots, so it's got to be planned and edited perfectly, and Ronin is a masterclass in how to cut together a car chase, and there are several in the movie, and they're all fantastic. These car chases elevate it to an incredible level, and they look pretty damn realistic as a result. Now, my next pick is a classic movie from 1967, and it would later be turned into a series, In the Heat of the Night.
Virgil, that's a funny name for a boy that comes from Philadelphia. What do they call you up there?
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
Mr. Tibbs! Well, Mr. Wood, take Mr. Tibbs, take him down to the depot, and I mean boy like now!
In this movie, Sidney Poitier plays a police detective who is mistakenly suspected of murder in a small Mississippi town because he's an unknown black man waiting at a bus stop in a small Mississippi town in the 1960s. But what makes this movie so interesting is that once he is cleared, he's then immediately asked to help solve this murder. And this movie does two things really well. First off, it handles all this racial tension that was actually still going on when this movie was filmed very well. And on top of that, though, it is a fantastic murder mystery movie. It's also such a classic that it's been remastered. It looks fantastic. There's an autopsy sequence in particular that is just really top-notch stuff. It's a little bit ahead of its time. And, of course, it's well acted as well. I mean, even to this day, Sidney Poitier is still one of the most famous black actors in movie history, and it's because of movies like this one. Speaking of racism, though, my next pick on this list is actually Apocalypto, directed by Mel Gibson. Now, for someone who doesn't direct many movies, when he decides to direct something, he really directs the hell out of it, and Apocalypto, I really do think, might be one of his best jobs in the director's chair, and I do really like his movies. I've mentioned the word storytelling several times in this particular video, and Apocalypto has it in spades, and you can tell because so little of the story is delivered to you with dialogue. This is an epic journey, there's tons of action in it, and the story works. You understand everything that's happening, you feel for the characters, despite the fact that they don't say very much. That is difficult to do, and it's just a harrowing story that manages to get better and better as you get towards the end. I would imagine most people watching have seen this movie because it was kind of a hit back when it came out, but if it's been a while, I promise you this movie holds up better than you would expect, and it's much better than you probably remember. But my number one pick on this list is another classic movie from 1968, and is one of the most classic horror movies of all time, even if it's one of the more subtle ones, Rosemary's Baby. Now, what is so fantastic about Rosemary's Baby is that this movie holds a secret and it holds it close. The movie lets you know that there's a secret, and Mia Farrow's character spends the entire, and I mean entire movie trying to figure out what it is. It sounds like it shouldn't work on paper. It sounds like you're not giving the audience what they need, but it was expertly directed and it manages to deliver. And this is a movie that is loved by directors, Wes Anderson in particular. This is his favorite film, if you can believe that, and you can kind of see where he picks up some inspiration from this movie. And is really one of those movies I think anyone that considers himself a movie buff needs to not only see, but needs to try to understand what makes this movie so good. And honestly, it's because it's a solid ride. It's entertaining all the way up to the end, and then they hit you with that surprise ending, an ending so surprising that they would try to replicate things like that afterwards, but no one has even come close to nailing it quite as well as this one has. But that is the list. Thanks again to Babbel for sponsoring this video. You can check out their link in the video description below. If you want even more movie recommendations, just go check out some of my recent uploads. I put videos up like this once or twice a week, every week, and I will keep making videos like this as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special Prime Video episode, and you will see me on the next one.